most debated questions in the history of the United Nations. Why do only 5 countries have veto power over all decisions at the Security Council? For almost 80 years, they've been at the top of the food chain. China, France, Russia, the UK, and of course the United States.
I was watching the UN Assembly a few days ago, and I saw how really Africa is technically undermined. How Africa is really taken as a joke, how Africa is really taken as a continent in general that has no power to say to what's happening around the world. An example, how can you give the whole African continent a seat on the UN Security Council, the body responsible for the power around the world, but you do not give it the veto power to decide, to make a choice on what happens around the world, but just to sit there and watch you as you make decisions? Here's why. Watch this video, we'll come back.
The world has changed since then, but the UN Security Council has not. Decades ago, the P5, or the Permanent Five as they're called, decided to allow countries to join as rotating, non-permanent members with no veto. After all, the Security Council is the most powerful body at the UN, with the ability to impose sanctions and to authorize the use of force against countries. And now Washington is talking about creating permanent seats for 2 African nations, but get this, with no veto power. Why? And why now? Today we're talking with Arikana Chihombori-Quao, former ambassador of the African Union to the United States. Ambassador, it's terrific to have you back on our show. I want to start with a film clip of the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield. Let's listen.
As it stands, there are currently 3 non-permanent seats on the Security Council allocated to African countries on a rotating basis for 2 years. The problem is these elected seats don't enable African countries to deliver the full benefit of their knowledge and voices to the work of the Council, to consistently lead on the challenges that affect all of us and disproportionately affect Africa. That is why, in addition to non-permanent memberships for African countries, the United States supports creating 2 permanent seats for Africa on the Council. It's what our African partners seek, and we believe this is what is just.
Ambassador Chihombori, let me ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastic are you about the proposal that the ambassador has just made?
I think it's a step in the right direction. However, keeping in mind that this issue has been on the table, ongoing for, like you said, 80 years. If we are going to right the wrong, why can't we just right this wrong once and for all? If Africa is going to become a member of the UN Security Council, a permanent member, they must have the full rights just like the other 5 members, which means they must have veto power. Inviting Africa to the table and then asking them to remain mute, it's an insult not only to the African leaders, but it is an insult to 1.4 billion people. We appreciate what Ambassador Greenfield is saying. We appreciate the efforts she has made. But if she is going to complete this journey that has been going on for far too long, a journey that clearly exemplifies the continued disrespect of the African continent, Ambassador Greenfield must push for us to take this issue to the finish line. Africa must have 2 permanent seats at the UN Security Council with full veto power. Nothing less is acceptable. And I do believe that the United Nations, understanding how long this issue has been going on, how long the disrespect of the African continent has been going on, it is shameful that the United Nations would want to continue to blatantly disrespect the Africans by inviting them to the table but then saying, sorry, you can't eat. You can only watch us play our games. You can watch us enjoy the 10-course meal. What a joke. What an insult. And I do hope that the African leaders are not going to accept it. Africa must be at the table as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and the 2 seats must have veto power, plain and simple, period.
First of all, what's the role of the UN Security Council? The role of the UN Security Council is to mediate in various ways. The countries going into a war, they mediate in a way they can sit on a table, bring all sides together to find a way to solve the conflict. Or maybe look at the war going on in Ukraine with Russia. The UN Security Council's role is to make sure sometimes throw sanctions towards a country which is oppressing another country, sometimes to deploy a military presence to protect a certain country which is, which is oppressed by the oppressor, or sometimes to influence countries via tariffs, via policies that can be passed through with the Security Council to make sure it forcefully can be received by the other side. So it's a powerful council. It's a powerful council that really determines the fate of various nations around the world. But recently, Africa, as you heard the lady say, was given a chance to be part of the UN Security Council with no veto power. So countries which have veto power are France, US, China, Russia, Germany, if I'm not mistaken. Means they decide who, should we ban with, who shouldn't we ban with. They decide, should we supply arms to this country because we have the highest power in the UN, Security Council. Should we supply arms to this country? Should we not supply arms to this country? They block decisions that sometimes can affect countries because of that veto power. That veto power determines a lot of the causes that are happening around the world. So it means Africa as a continent can have a stand with what's happening in Gaza, what's happening with Israel and Palestine. Can have power because it has that veto power, that decision, that stamp, the final stamp the US has to block various things, to block various agendas, to block various voices. Also, Africa can have that power to block various things happening around the world. China and the US, China and Africa, Russia and Ukraine. But without veto power, we're just witnessing people sharing a pie. She has said it all. But what do you think? Do you think we rather not have that veto power and just watch them share their pieces of cake together, or we're just spectators, just watchers? Oh, it's worthy. The countries around the world understand how powerful Africa is, how powerful these African nations independently are, also deserve a seat on a table whereby they can make decisions that really matter to the generations to come in Africa and all around the world. I feel it's a joke to give Africa a seat without a spoon to feed itself. I think it's a joke to bring Africa on a table and they just put it in wording, but in reality, Africa has no power to stamp its main decision in various topics around the world. What's your take? We may disagree, we may agree, but your disagreement, it will be so important if you drop in the comment section below. Your argument will be so important if you can discuss it more further in the comment section below. Because I do believe Africa, we have a lot of power. We have so many decisions we could have done better We could do better now and forever if we have these UN Security Council seats. We have these rotational UN Security Council seats. And also, we have this permanent seat on the UN Security Council. With veto power, we can stamp on the decisions happening in Israel. We can stamp on the decisions happening in Ukraine. We can stamp on decisions happening in Congo, in various countries around the world that are really affected by the Western power. What's your take? This is the Outpost. We have discussions together. Then we find out how we can have a common ground. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the Outpost. Coming back with another video. Bye-bye.